Welcome back to another episode of The Deep Dive, where we explore the issues shaping the future of life sciences and healthcare. Today, we're tackling a topic that's as exciting as it is unsettling: the ethics and equity of AI in healthcare. The question we want to ask is simple but powerful: who gets left behind?
Artificial intelligence is making waves in nearly every corner of medicine, from algorithms that detect cancer earlier than radiologists, to predictive models that help hospitals allocate resources, to chatbots that assist patients with managing chronic conditions. The potential feels limitless. But potential doesn't always translate to progress for everyone equally. In fact, if we're not careful, AI could deepen the very disparities it claims to solve.
That's the tension we want to unpack today. On one hand, AI can democratize access by bringing advanced tools to underserved areas. Imagine rural clinics with limited staff suddenly having diagnostic support powered by machine learning. On the other hand, these systems are only as good as the data they're trained on. And if the data underrepresents certain populations, the outputs can reinforce bias instead of eliminating it.
Think about it this way. If most of the training data for a cardiology AI comes from middle aged white men, how reliable is that model when applied to women or people of color or younger patients? There's growing evidence that models perform unevenly across groups, and in medicine, uneven can mean the difference between an early diagnosis and a missed one.
Exactly. And let's be clear, these aren't hypothetical scenarios. There are real-world examples already raising alarms. One widely cited study showed that an AI tool used to predict which patients would benefit from extra care management consistently underestimated the needs of Black patients. Why? Because the algorithm used healthcare spending as a proxy for health status. Since historically less money is spent on Black patients due to systemic inequities in access, the algorithm concluded they were healthier than they really were.
That's just one case, but it shows how bias sneaks in, not because someone designed it maliciously, but because the data reflected existing inequities. And when you put that into a clinical setting, those inequities can be amplified instead of corrected.
Another piece to consider is access to AI itself. Even as these tools become more common, not every hospital or clinic has the infrastructure to use them. Large academic medical centers and wealthy health systems are often early adopters, while smaller or rural hospitals may not have the resources to invest in AI-powered platforms. That creates a kind of AI divide where the benefits are clustered in certain areas, leaving others behind.
And then there's the global perspective. In high income countries, we're debating how to integrate AI responsibly. But in low and middle income countries, many facilities still struggle with basic healthcare delivery. So if AI is developed without global representation, there's a risk it simply reinforces a two-tiered system, cutting edge care for some while others are excluded from the start.
All of this raises deep ethical questions. Who is accountable when an AI tool makes a mistake? Is it the developer, the hospital, the physician who relied on the recommendation? And how do regulators like the FDA, EMA, or Health Canada evaluate safety and fairness when algorithms continuously evolve? Unlike a pill or a device that stays fixed after approval, AI can change with new data, meaning oversight can't just be a one-time event.
Exactly. And one more critical piece: transparency. Many AI systems function like black boxes, spitting out recommendations without clear explanations of how they got there. For physicians, that's a trust issue. For patients, it's even bigger. If you're told an algorithm decided your treatment plan, but you don't know why, would you trust it? And should you?
That's why explainability is such a hot topic in AI ethics. Regulators and ethicists are calling for models that aren't just accurate but interpretable. Because in medicine, it's not enough to be right. You have to be trusted.
So, as we set the stage for today's conversation, the big takeaway is this: AI has the potential to revolutionize healthcare, but without deliberate attention to ethics and equity, it risks leaving the most vulnerable patients behind. The promise of AI can't just be about efficiency and innovation, it has to be about fairness and inclusion.
One area that deserves more focus is regulatory oversight. Traditional frameworks weren't built with adaptive algorithms in mind. With a medical device or drug, you submit a fixed product for approval. But with AI, especially machine learning systems that update over time, what does approval even mean? Does the FDA need to re-review every model update? Or should there be ongoing monitoring systems, almost like post-market surveillance for algorithms?
Some regulators are experimenting with what they call predetermined change control plans. The idea is that developers map out in advance what kinds of updates their AI will make, how those updates will be validated, and how they'll be reported. That way, the tool can keep learning without needing a full reapproval every time. But here's the ethical catch: what happens if those updates start to drift in a way that impacts underrepresented patients differently?
That's where equity-focused audits come in. Just as financial systems undergo audits, there's a growing call for AI in healthcare to undergo bias audits, structured reviews that assess performance across race, gender, age, and socioeconomic groups. And these audits shouldn't be optional. They need to be part of the regulatory and ethical framework from the beginning.
Another critical issue is data privacy. For AI to be effective, it needs massive amounts of data: EHRs, genomic data, even wearable device outputs. But the more data you aggregate, the greater the risk of breaches or misuse. HIPAA in the US and GDPR in Europe set strict rules, but AI challenges those boundaries. For instance, de identified data sets can sometimes be re identified when combined with other information. That raises a question: how do we balance innovation with the fundamental right to privacy?
And let's not forget informed consent. When patients agree to share their data for treatment or research, do they fully understand it might also be used to train an AI system? In many cases, the answer is no. That lack of transparency risks eroding trust, not just in AI, but in healthcare more broadly. Patients want to know, how is my data being used? Who has access? And can I opt out?
Then there's the issue of global equity. AI is being developed primarily in high income countries, often trained on data sets from Western populations. When those tools are exported to low and middle income countries, do they actually perform well? Or do they risk producing inaccurate results because the local populations aren't represented in the data?
Take diagnostic imaging, for example. An AI trained on lung scans from US patients might not perform as accurately in populations with different environmental exposures, genetic backgrounds, or healthcare delivery systems. Without investment in diverse data sets, the global rollout of AI risks becoming a form of digital colonialism, where the technology is exported but not adapted to the needs of local communities.
Exactly. And that ties back to the ethics of commercialization. Many of these AI tools are being developed by private companies. Their priority is often speed to market and profitability, not equity. If left unchecked, that could mean tools are priced out of reach for lower resource clinics or only marketed to wealthier health systems. Innovation that doesn't scale across socioeconomic boundaries is innovation that leaves people behind.
So, what does responsible innovation look like? For one, it means building equity into the design process. That could involve requiring diverse data sets during model training, mandating independent bias testing, and including patients from historically marginalized groups in the development pipeline. It also means ensuring reimbursement models don't favor only well-resourced facilities. If payers only cover artificially intelligent assisted diagnostics in certain settings, the technology could widen gaps instead of narrowing them.
And beyond design, it means governance. Hospitals and health systems need internal structures to oversee how AI tools are adopted, who decides which models to use, how are those models validated locally, how are physicians trained to interpret results, and how do we ensure patients understand when AI is being used in their care. These aren't minor questions, they're central to ethical deployment.
At the end of the day, AI in healthcare is a powerful tool, but like any tool, its impact depends on how it's wielded. Used responsibly, it can expand access, reduce disparities, and enhance outcomes. Used carelessly, it can entrench bias, erode trust, and widen the gaps we're trying to close.
Another piece we need to dive into is clinical responsibility. AI systems may make predictions, but the ultimate decision rests with clinicians. That creates tension. If a doctor follows an AI recommendation and something goes wrong, who's accountable? The physician, the hospital, the software vendor? Right now, liability frameworks are lagging behind the technology. Until that's addressed, many clinicians may hesitate to fully trust or rely on AI, even when it could improve care.
This uncertainty ties directly into medical training. Most physicians and nurses were never trained to evaluate algorithms. They're taught to evaluate evidence from trials, clinical guidelines, and peer-reviewed studies. But when an AI system spits out a probability score or a risk ranking, how should they interpret it? What thresholds are meaningful? What biases might be baked in? Without new training frameworks, clinicians risk either over-relying on AI or dismissing it altogether. Neither outcome serves patients well.
Another aspect is the patient voice. Too often, patients aren't even aware that AI tools are being used in their care. Surveys have shown that many people assume a human doctor is the sole decision maker, when in reality, algorithms may be influencing everything from triage to treatment selection. Ethically, patients should know when AI is involved, and ideally, they should have the chance to consent to or decline its use. Transparency builds trust, while secrecy erodes it.
Let's also consider the economic divide. High-resource hospitals and academic medical centers are often the first to adopt AI because they have the budgets, the IT infrastructure, and the staff to support it. Community hospitals, rural clinics, and safety net providers often don't. That risks creating a two-tier system where wealthier patients benefit from the latest diagnostic and predictive tools, while others are left with slower, less precise methods. Over time, that gap could widen health disparities rather than close them.
And here's another angle: algorithmic monocultures. Imagine a world where every hospital uses the same vendor's AI for cancer diagnostics or risk scoring or treatment recommendations. If that algorithm has an undetected bias, millions of patients could be impacted in the same way. Diversity in algorithms coupled with independent validation is critical. We can't afford to have a single source of truth in medicine that may not serve all patients equally.
Globally, the stakes are even higher. In some regions, AI is being touted as a solution to shortages of trained physicians. For example, AI-powered diagnostic tools are being deployed in rural areas where specialists are scarce. While that can expand access, it also raises ethical questions. Are these communities becoming testing grounds for unproven technology? Are they being offered lower standards of care under the guise of innovation? True equity means making sure AI isn't just a stopgap solution for underserved populations, but a tool that genuinely elevates their healthcare outcomes.
We also need to talk about sustainability. Training large AI models consumes enormous energy and computing resources. As healthcare systems adopt more AI, the environmental footprint grows. Ethically, we have to ask, are we balancing the benefits to patients with the cost to the planet? Can we design more efficient models or prioritize solutions that minimize carbon impact? These are questions that are only starting to be asked, but they're crucial for long term equity.
And finally, there's the pace of change. Innovation in AI is moving faster than policy, faster than training, and faster than cultural adaptation. That mismatch creates risk. If we don't slow down to ensure equity and ethics keep pace, the technology could outstrip our ability to deploy it responsibly. And once trust is lost, once patients or providers feel burned by bad outcomes, it's very difficult to rebuild.
So, as we stand at this crossroads, the challenge is clear. AI in healthcare isn't just about what we can do, it's about what we should do and how we do it in a way that serves everyone fairly.
Another issue that deserves attention is intellectual property and data ownership. When AI systems are trained on patient data, who actually owns the insights that come out of them? Is it the patient whose data was used, the hospital that collected the data, or the tech company that built the algorithm? Right now, most of those rights are held by institutions or corporations, not by patients. That raises ethical concerns, especially when those algorithms are then commercialized and generate profit. Patients rarely see any benefit from their contribution, even though their health information is the raw material.
And this leads us to data diversity. A lot of AI in healthcare is being trained on data sets that are heavily skewed toward Western, urban, insured populations. If those models are then deployed globally, they can underperform in regions with very different demographics, genetics, or disease prevalence. Imagine an algorithm trained mostly on patients in North America being used in sub Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. The risks of misdiagnosis or missed signals skyrocket. Ethical AI requires ensuring that training data reflects the populations it will serve.
There's also a subtle but important point about health equity versus health equality. Equality would mean giving everyone the same AI tool. Equity means adapting that tool so it works fairly across different groups. If an algorithm performs well for men but poorly for women, or well for majority populations but poorly for minorities, simply deploying it equally across the board doesn't solve the problem. Equity requires constant testing, recalibration, and accountability to make sure outcomes are fair across subgroups.
Now, let's touch on commercial incentives. Many AI tools in healthcare are developed by private companies whose primary goal is profitability. That isn't inherently bad, it drives innovation, but it creates tensions. For example, will companies focus their AI solutions on diseases with large lucrative markets like diabetes or cardiovascular disease, while ignoring rare diseases that may be less profitable but equally deserving of innovation? Without public or nonprofit investment, entire patient populations could be left behind simply because the economics don't work out.
Another ethical concern is automation bias, the tendency for humans to trust machine outputs over their own judgment, even when the machine is wrong. Studies in clinical decision support have shown that physicians sometimes defer to algorithm recommendations, even when they conflict with their own expertise. This can be dangerous if the model is flawed. Mitigating automation bias requires not just training clinicians, but designing systems that encourage questioning and critical engagement rather than blind acceptance.
We should also talk about cross border data sharing. AI thrives on large data sets, but health data is often siloed by geography due to privacy laws like HIPAA in the US and GDPR in Europe. When companies try to combine data sets from multiple countries, they run into conflicting regulations. Some nations even classify health data as a national security asset, restricting foreign access. That creates inequity in research opportunities. Wealthier countries with big data sets move ahead while others lag behind. Solving this requires international agreements and ethical frameworks for secure, equitable data sharing.
On top of that, there's the risk of surveillance creep. AI tools developed for healthcare could be repurposed for less ethical uses. For example, facial recognition algorithms designed to monitor patient well being could be used by governments for surveillance. Or health risk prediction models could be exploited by insurers to deny coverage. The ethical challenge here is not just building AI for good, but putting safeguards in place so it isn't misused.
And finally, let's consider long term dependency. If healthcare systems become overly reliant on AI for diagnostics, monitoring, or decision making, what happens if those systems fail? What if a cyber attack takes down the infrastructure, or a company behind a widely used algorithm goes bankrupt? Ethical planning means building resilience, ensuring there are backup processes and human expertise in place so that patients aren't left vulnerable.
All of these issues ownership, diversity, incentives, bias, cross border collaboration, surveillance, and resilience point to one big takeaway. AI in healthcare isn't just about coding better models, it's about building systems that reflect human values, protect vulnerable groups, and prioritize long term equity over short term gain.
Another dimension that's gaining more attention is regulatory frameworks for ethical AI. Right now, there's a patchwork of guidelines rather than a unified global standard. The FDA has released discussion papers on AI and machine learning based medical software. The European Union is advancing its AI Act with strict requirements for high risk systems. And the World Health Organization has published principles for ethical AI in health. But the differences between these frameworks create a challenge for global developers. A model that's compliant in the US may not automatically be acceptable in Europe or Asia. That inconsistency risks leaving certain regions behind or slowing down access to innovations.
And that ties directly to the question of trust in regulatory oversight. Patients need to believe that regulators are holding AI to the same or even higher standards as traditional medical products. If approval processes are perceived as rushed or inconsistent, it undermines confidence in the technology. Transparency in how algorithms are reviewed, validated, and monitored after approval will be critical.
We should also talk about bias auditing and accountability. More companies are beginning to include fairness metrics in their development process, things like demographic parity, equalized odds, or subgroup analysis by race, gender, and age. But the question is, who enforces it? Should bias auditing be voluntary, left to industry, or should it be mandated by regulators? Without accountability mechanisms, it's too easy for companies to claim they've tested for bias without disclosing the details.
Another fascinating angle is patient agency. AI systems are often framed as tools for clinicians and health systems, but patients themselves increasingly want access to the insights these tools generate. Imagine an AI that predicts your risk of heart disease in the next 5 years. Should that prediction be shared directly with you or only with your doctor? And if patients do have access, how do we make sure they understand the information without misinterpreting it? Patient facing transparency is an ethical challenge we can't overlook.
Then there's the matter of economic displacement in healthcare jobs. As AI systems take on more tasks, radiology reads, pathology analysis, even elements of triage, what happens to the professionals who used to perform those roles? Some argue that AI will augment, not replace, but the reality is that job structures will shift. If AI adoption leads to job losses in certain specialties or among support staff, how do we balance innovation with fairness to the workforce? Ethical AI doesn't just mean fair to patients, it also means fair to the professionals whose work is being transformed.
We also need to touch on long term monitoring and drift. AI models don't stay static. Over time, as new data flows in, their performance can shift, sometimes in subtle but harmful ways. For example, an algorithm trained on hospital data before COVID-19 might not perform well in the post COVID landscape. This concept of model drift is well known in data science, but in healthcare it has life and death implications. Ethical deployment requires ongoing monitoring, recalibration, and in some cases, reapproval of models. Otherwise, inequities can creep in silently.
Another overlooked area is mental health AI. We're seeing chatbots and apps that claim to provide therapy or mental health support, often using natural language models. But these raise huge ethical concerns. Are patients receiving adequate care if the AI is their primary support system? What happens when a chatbot gives harmful or inaccurate advice? And how do we regulate systems that operate in such a sensitive, vulnerable space? If equity means access for all, then mental health AI could be a lifeline. But without proper safeguards, it could also be a risk.
And finally, let's highlight global disparities in AI access. Wealthier healthcare systems are rapidly adopting AI for diagnostics, population health, and drug discovery. Meanwhile, lower income countries often lack the infrastructure, bandwidth, or data to implement these tools. That risks creating a two-tiered system, one where wealthy nations benefit from cutting-edge AI technology, while others lag decades behind. Addressing this imbalance will require international collaboration, funding, and capacity building to ensure AI benefits are shared globally.
All of this shows that the ethics of AI in healthcare aren't just about technology. They're about governance, economics, and social justice. And unless we proactively address these layers, innovation risks leaving the very people it promises to help behind.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, let's bring the conversation full circle. AI in healthcare holds extraordinary potential, from accelerating diagnoses to expanding access in underserved regions. But the benefits won't mean much if they're not distributed fairly. Ethics and equity aren't side notes. They're central to whether AI succeeds or fails in transforming care.
We've talked about bias in data sets, regulatory frameworks, patient trust, global disparities, and even the impact on healthcare workers. Each of these challenges underscores the same truth. Innovation without accountability can deepen inequalities instead of solving them.
The path forward will require collaboration. Regulators, developers, clinicians, and patients all need to be at the table, shaping guidelines, sharing data responsibly, and holding systems to the highest standards of fairness and transparency. If we can do that, AI won't just be a tool for efficiency, it can become a force for justice in healthcare.
At Emma International, this is exactly where we focus our efforts, helping organizations innovate responsibly, align with evolving regulations, and keep equity at the heart of their strategies. If your organization is exploring AI in healthcare, we'd love to continue this conversation. You can reach us anytime at info@emmainternational.com or visit emmainternational.com.
Thank you for joining us on today's deep dive. Until next time, stay safe, stay compliant, and stay innovative.